Welcome to the second video of the Intro to Programming series. In this video, we'll be discussing a couple of topics. First, running a Python file, using the print function to display information, some basic math operations, reassigning variables new values, and functions that help identify data types. And as always, at the end of our video, we will cover a programming exercise that you can do to practice the skills that we learned. To run a Python file, we would normally be running a Python file locally on our computers, but as this is an intro to programming series, we're using this Replit website to be able to lower the barrier of entry on learning code. And to run a Python file in Replit, it's easy as clicking on that play button at the top. Once we have some code written out, we will be able to see the results of the code that we have written. So first off, to start off our video, we'll pick up where we left off, where in our last video, we learned how to create a variable. We also learned some data types that are going to come into play today, but this should look familiar on line 15. All I did was create a variable called greeting and store the value of hello world. Now, if I were to run this file at the moment, nothing would be displayed. And the reason why nothing is displayed is because the only way to see something being displayed in the console in the terminal is with the use of the print function. So the word function might be something new that you've never heard of before, but in programming, a function is just a collection of code that performs a task. And as you can probably imagine, the print function's purpose is to print or display information. With the function, you'll always have a set of parentheses following the function name, print. And what goes inside of the parentheses is the data that we are presenting to the function. So the print function, I am going to take the variable greeting and put it in between the set of parentheses. What I did just there is I passed the variable greeting as an argument to the function. The term argument means simply to present data to the function. So I am asking the print function to display whatever is inside of the variable greeting. And now when I press the play button now, you'll see there it is. We have our hello world message popping up here on the right side of the screen. So the print function is the function that we're going to be using to help us display and see the logic of things that we do. The print function doesn't necessarily only have to print variables. It can print strings directly as well if needed. And again, if I run the file again, now you'll see hello world and now you see hello world and John Doe popping up on our display over here. So now that we know how to display information to the terminal, let's discuss another function called the input function. The input function is going to allow us to simulate a user interacting with our program. So here, this code that you see on line 19, we have an input function, again, followed by a set of parentheses. And then here, the argument that I provided the input function, it's a string, what is your name? So for the input function, what you provide as an argument will be a prompt displayed to the user to ask them for some sort of information. Once that user types in the information in the response to that prompt, we would store that value inside of a variable here, like you see. Once I have the user's response, I can then take the print function to again display what the user's response was and to attach a greeting hi in front of their response. At this moment, if I run this file again, you will see hello world and John Doe. But this time you'll see what is your name, and you can see there is a blinking icon there. This is where you would type in your response to the prompt of what we are asking. In this situation, what is your name? I type out my name and I press enter. And you can see the hi Edward M was printed out by the print hi username. on line 20. So this is a way just for us to be able to simulate a program where a user is interacting with our logic. Some of the with what we have limited in terms of only terminal usage, this is a very simple and quick way for us to be able to create programs where we are simulating what it would be like to have a program be interacting with the user, with obviously us as being taking the role as the user. The next thing we're going to be learning about is some math operations. So since we'll be running our program quite often, what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment out some of the code that we don't want to run every single time I run my file. In Python, using the hashtag allows us to comment out certain code. I'm using this just to comment out the code so that this message doesn't get repeated over and over and over again, because we'll be running our file a decent amount now. So let's create another variable, number 42. Now, we have experience with creating variables and assigning values to them. We are assigning an integer to the number, and I can print number. And if I run this, you'll see the number 42, which is everything that we've learned in our previous video, along with the use of the print function now. So what I want to talk about next is how to reassign variables different values. So in Python, it is possible for us to reference a variable that exists, like number, and assign it a different value. Python actually doesn't care what type of data gets assigned to a variable or reassigned. So I can actually have a variable number and store a string for John Doe, and Python wouldn't care. But again, conventionally, we don't want our variables to swap data types once the variable is created and stored with a certain data type. So obviously for number, we wouldn't want to store anything other than an integer, since we did start off with having it store an integer to begin with. So we have the variable number now. And as mentioned before, I can always just assign it a new value. But what if I want to assign it a value based off of what the variable number is now? What if I would just want to add 1 to the variable number and I don't care what the variable number actually is? To do this, we're going to reassign the variable number to equal to whatever the number is plus 1. This is not only our introduction into reassigning a variable a new value, but our first introduction into some simple math operations. So in this video, we'll be covering the 4 basic math operations: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Plus sign is for addition, and for the rest of the math operations, asterisks will be the multiplication, dash will be the subtraction, slash will be the division, and as you can see here, there's 2 versions of division: slash and double slash. So Python is a little bit unique in that we have 2 different types of division. The single slash is what we call float division, and the double slash is what we call integer division. And as the name suggests, float division means that the result of any division operation with a single slash will always result in a float. So even if 4 divided by 2 is an even 2, the result will come out as a 2.0. And then that means that the integer division is that regardless of what the results of the integer division are, the result will be an integer. Now, this is an interesting scenario because 4 divided by 2, thankfully, is an even division and will result in a 2 as an integer. But what if we had 5 divided by 2? Well, 5 divided by 2 gives us a decimal value. How do we convert from a decimal value to an integer? Your immediate thought might be Python is either rounding up or rounding down the decimal value to get to the nearest whole number. but that is not the case. What happens with integer division actually is that the decimal values are dropped. They are deleted from the rest of the number, just leaving the whole number and to create an integer. So be careful when using integer division. You are not rounding up or not rounding down. You are simply truncating or getting rid of any decimal values within the results of the integer division, if there are any. So now that we've discussed how to reassign variables new values, some simple math operations, the last thing I want to talk about is functions that help identify data types. So there are two functions that we can use to help us identify data types. They are the type function and the isInstance function. And they both have their unique use cases. So the type function will return or tell us what the type of the data that you passed as an argument is. So in the type function, I presented the data of hello. So the type function will tell me that this is a string data type. I am including this type function inside of the print function because what these type functions do, and similarly what the input function does, is the input function returned to us or gave us the response of the user's input. Many functions act in a similar way, where usually we are presenting some sort of information to the function, and the function will return to us the results of that data. So the type function, we pass data into the type function and we present it as an argument. Then the type function will then respond and return the data type of the data that we sent as an argument. So the type function is a way for us to just figure out what kind of data that we are dealing with. So usually you would be checking to see if a variable has a specific data type, or if you're just curious about what type of data type a variable is containing, then that's what you use a type function for. The isInstance function works similarly, but it works specifically by telling you whether the value is or isn't a data type. So the isInstance function actually takes two arguments. The first argument is the data that you're trying to figure out the data type of, and the second argument is the data type that you are checking against. So right now, I am checking to see if hello is an instance of a string data type. And in this situation, yes, that is true. Hello is indeed a string data type. And in fact, if I run this, you'll see class int that is being printed here from line 30, the type number. And then here, the isInstance of hello string, I am getting a response of true because it is indeed true that hello is a data type string. And if I were to change this to an int to check to see if hello is an int or not, and I run this again, you will see that it has now become false. So the type function is just a quick way to see the actual type of data that the value is, and the isInstance function is to check to make sure whether the value is the actual data type or not. So to review this video, we have went over how do we run a Python file. And again, we are using Replit, which again is on the free tier. There is a paid tier, but with everything that we're doing in Intro to Programming series, you'll only really need the free tier. And to run it, all you need to do is just press the play button at the top left-hand side of where you write your code. The print function is just a function we use to display data on the terminal. And it's just a way for us to see the results of some of the operations and logic that we're going to be writing within our code. The math operations are the standard math operations that we've discussed before. All the standard math operations are available in Python, and they also follow the PEMDAS rule of order of operations. Reassigning variables is a way to reassign a variable that already exists to a new value. That's what we did here on line 29, but also lines 30 to 33. And yes, it is technically possible to reassign variables to different data types in Python, but again, it is something that we want to avoid. Just because something is possible doesn't mean that it is conventionally a great way to write code. And lastly, we discussed functions that help identify data types. We have the two types of functions, which is the type function and the isInstance function. They both have their use cases, but they both exist to help us identify and understand what type of data a value is. And then lastly, as a programming exercise, please do these two questions. First is to create a variable for your personal information and display them to the terminal. So personal information, name, phone number, street address. Again, this is just personally on your website. And if you don't feel comfortable even on a Replit website, writing your personal information down, then just make up some fake personal information, John Doe, phone number 555, address 123 Street Way, and so on and so forth. You don't have to write your actual personal information. This is mainly just to, again, get into the habit of writing code and being able to display them using the print function and just gaining confidence in writing code and building the muscle memory for being able to write some code out. And then the second question, which is to create 4 variables for numbers and perform the 4 math operations and display the results. So try to come up with new variables for each of those numbers. You don't have to get too fancy with it. We've discussed before how you can create variables with numbers as long as your variable starts off as an alphabetical character. So you're more than welcome to have variables like number 1, number 2, but the point of this question is to, again, just get into the habit of writing code, gaining the confidence of writing some simple code out and being able to run it, but also just seeing what the results of that are. You'll be surprised to find out that some of these math operations will produce results that are a little bit funky. But that is it for our second video in this series. Thank you for watching.